All right. Hi again, everyone. My name's Hannah. I'm going to be talking about my investigation into the harassment, discrimination, and denial, so the Massachusetts Department of Corrections mistreatment of transgender prisoners. So first, some background. This is an investigative journalism project, so it's slightly different from a lot of the projects of my peers, and that it's not your sort of traditional academic or scientific research project. It's also not necessarily a creative project. So it uses a slightly different standard of ethics that are no less important, just kind of different. I'm not trying to make a generalization here or show a correlation between variables. I'm simply collecting sources and information and interviews and coming up with sort of reporting it out to the general public. So a lot of this also for background is based on sort of studies of transgender prisoners. So in the past, there have been sort of national studies that have shown that incarcerated trans people face higher rates of sexual and physical assault and abuse, particularly trans women incarcerated in men's facilities. So that's a little bit of background on what I will be talking about. So where does the information in my project come from? So first, it comes from interviews with currently incarcerated transgender people. So specifically, I've been speaking over phone, email, and letters with 4 currently incarcerated trans women. 2 of them are in a women's facility and 2 are in a men's facility. I've been speaking with experts, so that's advocates, lawyers, people within the DOC or the Department of Correction. I've also been looking at court documents, requesting public records, looking through government audits, as well as other published surveys and studies. So a whole host of different types of information. So one of my public records requests to the Department of Correction was how many transgender, I don't really like the word inmate, but this is their official chart they sent me. Out of 16 state facilities, there are 45 incarcerated transgender people that are documented. So this number is likely much higher, but this is people specifically who are able to get a diagnosis of gender dysphoria because there is currently no voluntary survey of whether currently incarcerated people in the state identify as a member of the LGBTQ community. And then also just on this list, only MCI Framingham is a women's facility. So everyone else is incarcerated in a men's facility here. So they just don't care. This is what Michelle Kasilik, who is currently incarcerated at MCI Framingham, told me. So Michelle has been incarcerated since 1992, and she spent the first 27 years of her sentence in a men's prisons across the state. She was only moved in 2019, and that was after she's had this diagnosis of gender identity disorder, now called gender dysphoria, since 1999, and her gender has been legally declared as female since 2012. She's faced a lot of mistreatment in men's prisons, as well as discrimination in the women's prison now that she's there. She's also been trying to get gender affirming surgery for years now, and she's been going through court cases, numerous ones that last decades sometimes, grievances and other sorts of reports and advocacy, and she still has yet to receive her surgery today. So people that are currently incarcerated who are trans, like Michelle, have a few different pathways of reporting mistreatment. So I sort of mentioned lawsuits, but that's outside of the DOC specifically, and that costs a lot of money. It's really time consuming, and a lot of times just in general, incarcerated people are seen as unsympathetic plaintiffs. So a lot of times it's not really gonna work out well. There's also PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which I'm gonna go into in a little bit, and grievances. And here's an example of a grievance right here. So first, what is PREA? The Prison Rape Elimination Act was passed by Congress in 2003, and it's a method of reporting and accountability. So Massachusetts has been reporting these results from different surveys they do since 2013. So there's 5 different allegation categories. So this can be an allegation from a prisoner or staff at a prison, and they can either be instances of abuse, harassment, or assault between 2 incarcerated people, or misconduct or harassment from staff. There's also a preliminary and a final report. So the preliminary report is just every single allegation, and then they investigate these and they determine whether they're substantiated, so this did happen, unsubstantiated, we don't have enough information to say, or unfounded, we have the information to say this did not happen definitively. And then there's also the final report, which is the government audit, which is what's on their website and has to be reported for compliance. But PREA can also be used as a sword in the form of false allegations. And a lot of times this disproportionately impacts LGBTQ prisoners. So there could be consensual sex between two prisoners that someone would say, oh, this is assault, and report them for simple just homophobia. It could also be not even a sexual act. Like one of the currently incarcerated people I'm speaking with, her boyfriend kissed her on the hand and they both got sent to solitary confinement. So even if these allegations also are later proven to be false, a lot of times while they're investigated, people are stuck in solitary, specifically if it's a transgender person who's involved. Say they report someone assaulted them, they're still going to be stuck in solitary while it's investigated. So one person I've been speaking to has been in solitary for over 3 weeks now because of a false pre-allegation. So according to Michael Cox, the director of Black and Pink Massachusetts, PREA is a weird kind of game that everybody plays. He represents an LGBTQI prisoner advocacy group. So what does he mean by that? He means that these are the preliminary results for all the PREA surveys. So here's all the different initial allegations and how they categorized them. So these are the different sort of categories I had mentioned. As you can see, everything related to two incarcerated people, the majority are unsubstantiated. Yet somehow, when it relates to staff, they have found the evidence to say that it is unfounded. But overall, there's still 104 substantiated instances that we can see on this graph. So clearly even if they're unsubstantiated or unfounded, there's clearly something is going on in these prisons. And yet, when you go to the official government reports or audits that look like this, there have been 0 standards not met. So somehow, on the forward-facing end, what we see is that every single standard has been met. And this sort of goes into the idea of the game, and that if there's things noted in the preliminary report, there is time to go back and address those. So if they're addressed before the auditor comes, they then don't have to be in the final report. So what is supposed to be a method of accountability clearly is not working like that. So another potential pathway is grievances, and that's submitted either against another prisoner or staff. A lot of times it is staff. But according to Elizabeth Matos, who's the executive director of Prisoners Legal Services here in Boston, it's more of a rubber stamping process. You don't actually really get anything done. So I was able to, through a public records request, acquire all grievances from the past decade from the DOC related specifically to gender identity. And this graph sort of shows what the results were of every single grievance. So 70% were specifically denied. Sometimes there's a reason for the denial, sometimes there was no reason. Actually, only one grievance was approved, and it was because someone's razor broke and they needed it to be replaced. So a lot of times also people will have grievances just disappear for no reason, or they just simply give up on submitting grievances because it can lead to retaliation and just nothing happening. It's also important to note that 97% of these came from men's facilities. So the government's solution to all these grieved offenses was the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2018. So this wasn't specifically just for trans people who are incarcerated. It had other things about restrictive housing and things like that, but there are a few specific relevant aspects. So first, they established this LGBTQI Special Commission to study the health and safety of incarcerated people in that population. There's 8 members. 2 of them are Elizabeth Matos and Michael Cox, who I quoted before, and I've interviewed both of them. They've only released so far a preliminary report, which is supposed to be publicly available, but really is not. It took a records request to find. They had a lot of difficulty collecting data. The county prisons that were surveyed were able to give most of the data, but the DOC, so the state facilities, were not. And they also have monthly commission meetings, which I sat in on one of them. And again, they talked about how they weren't really able to interview a lot of people or visit facilities. And both Michael Cox and Elizabeth Matos described working with the DOC as very frustrating because it seems like they're having to explain a lot of concepts that should be sort of basic and they're not able to get to more advanced or in-depth topics. Michael Cox specifically also mentioned feeling like he was shut down a lot. Another thing is there's specific provisions for transgender prisoners. So according to this act, prisoners should be provided with housing, commissary items, and guards conducting strip searches that match their gender identity. But there's also a massive asterisk in this, and that there's so many different sort of exclusions or cases where this is not, like, you can be like, actually, I don't want to follow through on this. Has anything changed? So as you can see from this graph, it looks like things have gone down in 2017. I can't really tell you why. But if you look between 2018 and 2019, here's where the law went into effect. There is a 0% change. And it may also look like it went down in 2021, but remember, it's only April. So those are the only grievances I have for this year. And also, a lot of the people who submit grievances have been in prison for a long time, and eventually they kind of give up. So looking ahead, I'm going to be finishing my interviews and finishing my data analysis, and hope to have, by the end of this year, produced a full publishable article. Thank you.